Saints GM Mickey Loomis' end of season press conference part 2. If you didn't see part 1, go on the channel, watch that first. We are reacting to this fully and then chunking it up so that you don't have to watch a 4.5 hour long video. So again, don't watch part 2 first. Go in order, go back to part 1. Let's get straight to the rest of the press conference.
I'm surprised how well Andrews played at left tackle, because usually you don't talk about him when he's doing his job. And I thought he was outstanding, considering that, mainly he's a guard, and then how he finished the whole season at left tackle.
Yeah, I would.
Andrews Pete's been very versatile. He's played every position on the offensive line. Availability is the best ability, and very impressive to see him move around in his career.
I would say, yeah, he gets thrown back out there, and did a good job. He did. Really pleased with that, and I think that gives him some confidence as well.
Every offseason is a balancing act between putting together the best roster and staying fiscally responsible.
Yeah.
Do you ever get to the point where, when you're over the cap every offseason, where you look at it and say,
you mean like every year?
What's that?
You mean like every year?
Yeah, like every year, where you say maybe we need to look at the financial foundation for the future,
yeah,
and maybe make some tough decisions with older players and count on our player development and drafting and free agency and roll the dice a little, counting on younger people to evolve?
Yeah, I think.
So I think the way that the Saints do it is, I think the Saints fund these chapters or these eras or these windows. They fund them independently of the whole picture. I think the Saints are one of the teams that, some teams balance a cap, like a big picture cap. They just have a cap. They manage that. Some teams manage the cap, like the Saints are, to like the here and now. So they're trying to finance a 2-year window, a 3-year window, a 4-year plan. They're trying to finance these like little bitty bubbles and constantly move stuff around to do that. I kind of like that style of doing it. I kind of like the idea of sell the future, I guess you could say, to finance the present. That's how I would do it. You only have what's in front of you. You don't know how things are going to go in the future. You don't know how things are going to shake out. You don't know how all that's going to play. So to me, do everything you can to win now if you think you can. The Saints think they can right now. And they probably can. They can win the NFC South with the roster. They can make a run. We can do what the Buccaneers are doing right now. So I don't think you ever, as a fan, you want your team to sit back and say, look, guys, bad news. We can't do nothing. We can't go after quarterbacks. We can't go after free agents. We can't extend players. We can't do any of that stuff because we're managing the cap for the future. As a fan, it's like, brother, I don't know if next week is promised to me. I want to win right now. I'm not worried about winning 10 years from now. Who cares? Who knows? Who knows what the next TV deal is going to be? Who knows what the next cap and all this stuff is going to be? So do what you got to do to win now. I like how the Saints operate. It is certainly risky to do it that way, because you're basically managing like 10 little caps versus one big cap. But if we can do it, which we have, I say keep doing it. And don't forget, guys, the salary cap is fugazi. And no team has ever not been able to play on Sunday because they didn't pay their bills.
I think, we go through that process every year in the off season, and I've said this before, is that we had kind of a vision and a plan for post Drew Brees, and then COVID hits and we get this big setback relative to the cap and finances, and so that's caused us to recalibrate a little bit, but. The answer to the question is yes, we do that. I'm not going to tell you what we're doing, but we do that.
What was
and we have to make up some ground. There's no question. Over a period of time here, we're going to have to make up some ground cap-wise.
What was the thinking behind the timing of reworking Marshawn Latimer's bonus, like while the season was still going on, and making it an option bonus? Obviously some of those come in.
So a lot of people assume that the restructuring for Lattimore's contract means that they possibly could trade him. I think that's what this question is alluding to. Like, hey, did y'all do this so that you can move off of him? Very similar to the Michael Thomas restructuring in the last couple of years, where it gives them a little flexibility to see if they want to move off of him, if they want to re-sign them, all that stuff.
It's just cap management. I don't want to get into details of it.
There wasn't a purpose to be like that.
Yeah, there's a purpose.
Trade.
I'm not going to tell you what the purpose is.
Consider it trade.
It's just cap. It's just cap management. That's what it is.
See, this is here's some journalism 101. Everyone knows I cut my teeth as a crime reporter for a Pulitzer Prize winning newspaper. Not a big deal. Here's a lesson to all you future journalists. If you want to be interviewing people, do not ever assume they're picking up on the question. His question, not directly, but his question was, did you restructure Marshawn Lattimore's contract in order to trade him? Do you plan on trading Marshawn Lattimore? That's the direct question that was not asked, but was alluded to. Loomis took it a different way. Loomis talked about cap management and whatever else. So then the reporter has to ask a second question. His second question gets interrupted by another reporter who then asked the direct question, are you trading Marshawn Lattimore? The original reporter doesn't want his hard-hitting question to go unnoticed. So then he triples down, and then he tries to talk over the other reporter. And then nobody ends up getting the question across. It's a jumbled mess, and all Loomis says is, it's cap management. If the reporter would have off the bat said, are you restructuring Marshawn Lattimore to trade Marshawn Lattimore? It is a hard-hitting soundbite question that you get, and then Mickey Loomis has to answer the direct question. So if you're ever in this position, if you're ever interviewing somebody, be as direct as possible. Ask the question. Do not be afraid to ask the question. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't allude to it. Don't hint at it. Ask the question.
Since 2017 draft was incredible, since then, how would you evaluate what you've done since then, and will you tweak your philosophy as far as the draft? Have you evaluated that as to what you might do to maybe get some more results there?
I would say D+ would be since that draft. The draft, since we hit on draft picks like Marshawn Lattimore, Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, since we hit on players like that, even the Ryan Ramczyks of the world, it's been a steady decline. It's been a steady decline of the Marcus Davenports of the world and the Peyton Turners of the world and the Trevor Pittings of the world. It just hasn't been there. Just hasn't worked out. I think part of that is that the Saints were trying to get these kind of fringe players, these high risk, high reward players, trying to find the diamond in the rough constantly instead of getting a good player. We've seen a lot of, okay, can we go get a guy from Conference USA or the Sun Belt or Northern Iowa or wherever? Can we go get this guy no one's looking at and possibly find a Pro Bowler that no one else is looking at? And maybe we should be going after the good players. We should be going after the players who were good in college or highly touted or successful already. Can they come in and then can we elevate them a little more? A la Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, Marshawn Lattimore. Can we do that? So maybe it is time to kind of relook at, and I think some of that too, and this is just completely me, complete conjecture of what I think might have happened. I think Peyton believed that he could make anything work. I think he believed we don't have to go get the wide receiver from USC, because if we get a wide receiver from Vermont, I can mold them. I can take them and make them good. And I think that strategy carried over to without Peyton, where it's shown like we're not developing players as like we once were. So it probably is time to revisit the draft strategy.
Yeah. Well, look, I think a number of these drafts, the results have yet to be written.
Yeah.
And look, 2017 was incredible, right? I don't expect to duplicate that every year. I'd like to duplicate that every year, but don't have that expectation. So, no, I think our philosophies are sound, and I don't see that changing.
It's also, I was just having this conversation about the Golden State Warriors. So everyone assumes they're great drafters, right? Here's a fact for you. Since Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green, so since those three, they have not drafted a player that made an all-star game. They have whiffed on every other pick they made besides those 3. Every one. Now, if you look at the players, you can see a theme where they're not trying to get like a scorer. They're not trying to get a volume guy. They're not trying to get a ball-dominant point guard. They're not trying to get those players because they have Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. So they're trying to find these very specific diamonds in the rough. And when you lessen your scope in the draft, a really good way to come up with a brilliant idea is to come up with a bunch of ideas. Okay, just throw stuff at the wall. Same with drafting. If you narrow your scope, if you're like, well, we can't get this wide receiver because we already have this. Well, we can't get running backs because we already have this. Well, we can't get a linebacker because we already have these people. Well, we can't get it. Well, we can't. Then all of a sudden, you've got a very small pool, and it's already hard enough to hit on draft picks as it is. So the chances of you hitting on a much smaller pool is much worse. Much worse. And I feel like that's what the Saints have done, and that's what the Warriors do, is they've shrunk their pool to the point where it's almost like playing the lottery.
Yeah, I was just curious. It didn't come out yesterday, but maybe it wouldn't. Or is anybody on the current staff up for the OC job? I mean,
Hell no.
I'm going to keep that
no.
list to ourselves right now. But it'll.
Same thing. That reporter's the exact same thing. That reporter should have said, is Ronald Curry a candidate for offensive coordinator? Because he's the only one on the offensive staff that could possibly be entertained for the job. So he should have said, is Ronald Curry up for this? I don't think he is, because we need a new vision. We need to go outside of the building. We need to find a new culture, new vision, new eyes, new strategy, new innovation, all that stuff. We're not going to get it from airline drive.
You know, those candidates will come out eventually.
Mickey, how about with Coach Marone? A lot of fans have asked me like how he's developing the offensive line, and guys putting up their expectations. And I mean, I don't know, it was just a rumor like, oh, he might end up retiring with all the years that he's coach. So where do you think Coach Marone's at along with the offensive line right now?
Yeah, I think he's a fantastic coach. I do, and I haven't heard anything about him retiring, so that would be a surprise to me.
You mentioned some of the stats earlier about like maybe not paying attention to them. You've seen this league evolve over decades.
Yeah.
Where do you kind of, or how do you reconcile the data-driven analytics versus kind of that gut feel, so to say?
Yeah, that's good.
So, great question. I can tell this reporter watches my channel because we talk about this topic all the time. We talk about the future of the NFL. We talk about stats. We talk about data. Talk about analytics. We are driving this conversation, so I appreciate one of our subscribers being here asking questions. No doubt about it. I wish you would have given me a shout out, but it is what it is. Maybe next time. I think you have to blend it. So there's 2 wrong answers. Wrong answer 1 is you just go with your gut. You got to go man management. You got to go, old school. You got to take points when you can get them. You got to run it on first down. You got to do the tried and true football things. The other wrong way is you always follow the analytics. You do have to factor in that there's human beings involved. You do have to factor in momentum. You have to factor in players. You have to factor in game script. You have to factor in all that kind of stuff. Just because the analytics say something, you might want to think twice. It is a blend. What I think the perfect situation is to have a coach who is a really good in-game manager. He really understands the game script. He really understands the adjustments during the game, understands all that stuff. Then I think if you have people in the booth feeding him the numbers, feeding him the percentages, giving him the exact data, and then letting him make the decision because he knows his players, he knows the game script, he knows the momentum, all that stuff. Blending the 2. I like to think of it as playing blackjack. So if you've ever played blackjack, you may come up to a situation where you might have like a ton of money on the table and you may have a really hard decision. Analytically, it might be like, yeah, it's correct to hit here. But you may be thinking like, well, I don't have any more chips. I have no more chips. Maybe I should play it safe. Like just for this one, I'm stretched too thin. Maybe I should play it safe. And then, the next time this comes up and I have more chips or I have a little more leeway, then maybe I'll hit and see what happens or whatever. That's how I feel like these situations are in the game. So it's these, you definitely want to know the analytics. You definitely don't want to just go on feel. You don't want to go on just gut. You don't just want to be a robot, because if everyone is being a robot, then it's very easy for coaches to know what you're doing or to game plan for you or to plan against you or all that stuff. You got to be able to understand the data, see the analytics, get the percentages, understand what it all means, and then to somehow make the decision in real time. That's the future. That's where you got to go moving forward.
Good question. Look, I think that analytics have been around a long, long time, way longer than we've been talking about them. They existed in 1983 when I started. We just didn't call them analytics. I think it's a tool in the toolbox, right? And you have to view it as such. And so I just look at it. And look, we got a lot more data, a lot more information than we did certainly then. And even in the last 3 or 4 years, we got a lot more data.
Here's another example. Here's another good example. Let's say the analytics say that the EPA is way better if you pass on first down during the game. The way your offense is built, whatever. The wrong way to take that data would be to pass on every first down. Because if you're passing on every first down, then it's easy for the defense to know what's going on. It's easy for the defense to sell out for the pass or to pin their ears back and go after the quarterback or whatever. Even if you are taking a EPA loss or you're bucking the analytics by running on first down, just to keep them honest, keeping them honest is one of those or setting up for a pass play in the future or whatever. That's what I'm talking about, blending that human element into it. You can't just take the science or take the numbers and say, well, we're averaging 0.8, plus 0.8 yards per play by passing instead of running, so we have to pass every single time. You can roll a little bit of that human side into a game plan, game script.
That we need to pay attention to, and so we do. But it's a tool in the toolbox, and there's still, some of these analytics tell you to go for it on every fourth down, right? Well, what if you don't have a fourth down play that you like, right? What if you have a player that's injured at a particular position that's key to? So there's just a lot of factors and variables, and so I look at analytics as valuable, but a tool in the toolbox.
1983, but people ask this question and rumors get out there with social media and stuff like that. You've been doing this a long time. Your role is not changing here. You seem energetic about recalibrating the organization. The front office is staying the same as far as your position.
Yeah, I saw a couple things. That was just
last night randomly. I mean, I was getting alerts. I was making dinner and winding down, and all of a sudden I'm seeing Mickey Loomis may become vice president. We may have a new GM. There might be all kind of shakeups. I get here, I turn the lights on in the studio, I get the mic ready, and all of a sudden, then I see it's not true. So be careful out there, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody wants to be first, but not everyone is worried about being right.
It's made up, whatever. I know what you're referencing. Somebody just made that up. That's never been discussed or talked about. Now, am I slower? Yeah, I probably ran a 4.5 when I was 30, and I don't think I could run 5 flat right now. So I am slower, but yeah. I've been asked that question. You get asked that when you get to a certain age, right? Whatever age that is. And I've said, look, I'm just going to wake up one morning and say this is the day. And it's not going to be tomorrow, but everything for the next 10 years is open. We'll see.
Another thing about analytics is I think it helps those who are quote unquote getting slower. For a young general manager or in any field or any position, you can ingest so much data. You can watch every TV show on a topic. You can listen to every podcast on a topic. You can read countless articles. You can do all this stuff. And as you get older, it's like, man, it's hard to find time to wash dishes after I cook dinner. It's hard to find time to do that. So if you can just get the numbers, and if you understand how to read the numbers and parse the numbers and do whatever you got to do, that can kind of catch you up. Especially if you're the general manager of the Saints, who you should be able to have a team of analytical, counsel or whatever that gives you the data, breaks it down for you, and then you can make the decisions off that. then you don't have to put in the legwork. It's the same with like AI and moving towards AI. Utilizing AI to save you time and do all that stuff, that's very important, right? Like that's the whole point of it. So if I was a general manager, if I was Mickey Loomis, I would be using data and analytics to speed everything up. The old school, like watching film on every single college player to see what they're doing. Give me the data. Give me the data. Give me the analytics. If something sticks out, then I'll go back, double back, check the film or whatever. Like it's the whole Moneyball thing. I mean, you all seen the movie Moneyball. The old scouts were, they cared about what the players' girlfriends look like and what they ordered at dinner and all this stuff that didn't mean anything. Billy Beane moved to this like analytics, the data, then he used that to determine good and bad players.
Mickey, when you were asked about DA earlier, you mentioned the stats of other coaches' careers, but what are some of the things he's done in the last 2 years or some of the qualities he has that led you to believe that he can get the team back to the playoffs?
Can't wait to hear this answer because I have absolutely no clue. What are some, I can't wait to hear these cliche buzzword. We should do like a bingo card. We should do like a bingo card of what he's going to say because it's going to be the most cliche things possible. It'll be he's passionate maybe, or he loves the game, or he's smart, or it's just going to be words that you can't quantify because that's the only thing he can possibly say.
Yeah, well, I think the things that the head coach is responsible for, game day management, scheduling, all the things that you guys don't see that I see or that we see internally, I feel good about. And yeah, there's certainly areas that he can quarterback change. We've had some things changed in the last two or 3 years.
Happened? Did we just slip through some kind of parallel dimension?
We got to look at ourselves and say, okay, what's our expectations? Are they realistic? And
I don't want to be conspiracy theory tinfoil hat, but does anybody think maybe Mickey said something that was controversial yet brave, and the Saints PR said, "Hey, cut that part out of the YouTube broadcast"?
If we're not meeting those expectations, what can we do differently? And I don't believe that that's the head coach right now. I like Dennis Allen. I think he's a good coach.
Offensive coordinator, do you share that with Derek Carr as far as his input and what he thinks, or is it like, okay, you make the decision and then he has to accept it, or is he involved in that?
It would be so dumb to not involve Derek Carr in this conversation. He doesn't need to be in the interview per se, but he definitely needs to have some input. Him and Mickey need to have a conversation of, hey, what do you like? What do you think we need? What do you want to see? What do you think would drive the offense? Just even if you don't do exactly what he said, he's your $150 million franchise quarterback. If he thinks, well, we need to do blank better, we need a guy who can see this, we need a guy who can do blank, you have to factor that in. So I'm hoping Mickey and Derek are going to have a conversation. I think same on the other side of the ball. If it was a defensive coordinator, having Cam Jordan, having Demario Davis's input is very important. So I think it would be bananas and pajamas to not involve your players in these kind of decisions.
Yeah, we don't ask our players to make decisions. We don't. It's not a burden. That's not a burden that we put on them. Now we talk to a lot of our veteran players about the season, about the things that we expect from them, and they should certainly have expectations from us. But we're not asking them to do any evaluations of any kind.
Just to kind of rephrase that a little bit. Well, Derek Carr's, whatever offense coordinator you go with, Derek's obviously got to be a big factor in that decision, right? Like he's got to be able to work with that.
Well, look, when we make a hire, when Dennis makes a hire, certainly he's going to make the hire that'll work for him. But that'll be our assessment. That won't be. We're not going to ask him if he approves.
I'm a little confused with what Mickey's saying. I don't think anyone expects Derek Carr to be approving the hire or Derek Carr to be signing this guy. But if he's telling me that Derek Carr will have absolutely no input and that Derek Carr will just learn who the hire is like the rest of us will, that to me is pretty crazy. I mean, if they just tell Derek, hey man, we just signed blank guy, thoughts? That would, how can you not just have one conversation with Carr, pick his brain a little bit, and then go from there.
Proves it of A, B, or C, right? Does that make sense?
When you guys do hire the OC, will the OC have input on some of the openings, like maybe guys that he would want to bring with him? How does that come?
Yeah, we'll see.
Here's another little tidbit, golden tidbit. I'm dropping so many golden tidbits. Never say, does that make sense, or do you understand, or right, or anything like that. Because people that say that usually say it because they don't think they explained whatever very well. And that's usually why they say it. They're usually saying it because they're thinking internally like, man, that made no damn sense. So they're trying to get like some kind of subliminal validation. So if you are someone who's constantly saying, does that make sense? You got that? All good, understand, whatever. More than likely, it means you probably could explain it a little better.
See where that goes.
It's one of those like subliminal communication things that happens between people.
If you do, and again, things that are out there, I know you can't talk about coaches, but John Gruden's name keeps popping up. How much of it has to be, you know him as a person, but knowing the situation and what happened and how he feels about it, just from a news perspective, not even talking about him here.
Yeah.
Does anybody know who's asking this question? This is the guy who asked the question about the analytics, the subscriber. I can tell I can tell he knows what he's talking about. I can tell he's a fan of the game. I can tell he follows the game. I can tell he knows what he's talking about. And he certainly is asking the best questions. I think he's phrasing the questions probably the best too. So whoever that is, whoever that is, kudos. Very, out of everyone who's been talking, besides me, he's definitely doing the best job.
It's a fair question, but I don't really want to talk about any individual candidates for that role. It's a fair question, but yeah, we'll answer that when we hire.
Yeah, I don't think he can legally. I'm not sure the tampering rules in the NFL. I don't think Loomis can talk too specifically about candidates. I don't think he can really go into anything about Gruden or anything about that until there's some kind of a hire or until there's an interview. So I don't blame him for not really going into this, but I think that's why he's being coy.
How quickly do you expect that process to go? Is it one where you would like to take a little bit more time doing it, or is it, I think another wrap?
I think you got to do it before the draft, well before the draft, because I think you want to bring in this offensive coordinator to start evaluating draft prospects. You want to bring in this offensive coordinator to start working with the offense and filling gaps, like Michael Thomas, and filling different holes, figuring out how you're going to do that, whether it's through free agency or through draft picks, whatever. But you can't do that unless he's in the building. So I would say draft prep probably starts in earnest in 3 weeks? First week of February, second week of February, somewhere in there. So I would think you got to have the OC in the next, the next 2 weeks, next 2.5 weeks.
Good approach.
Yeah, I think, look, one of the mistakes that our league in general makes is, we're in a rush and a race to hire people because we're afraid of, someone else, beating us to the draw. I think that's a mistake. I think the most important thing is get the right guy in the right situation, take your time, make sure it's a thoughtful, planned decision. So we're gonna go through the process, and we're gonna make the right hire. We're not gonna make the expedient hire.
It's also a domino effect. The season isn't over, right? There's a lot of coaches out there. Once one or two coaches get hired, it'll start a domino effect. Once Bill Belichick is hired, once Vrabel's hired, once all these coaches kind of move, that creates like a faster end goal. Because right now everything's possible. Right now, Vrabel can go to 10 different teams. But once you see, same with coordinators, right? The Falcons can't hire. I'm just going to make something up. The Falcons can't hire an offensive coordinator until they hire Bill Belichick, right? Or a head coach. The Chargers can't fill assistant positions until they fill the coach. The coach may come with assistants, so it may fill itself. So it all happens very fast once it happens. But the season is still too early in the playoffs, I think, for a lot of those dominoes to fall. So it's one of those things where you got to kind of hurry up and wait. You got to have your interviews. You need to do as many interviews as you want to. Be ready. Understand who your top candidate is, who number 2 is, who number 3 is. Have everything figured out to where once those dominoes start dropping, you can make something happen.
Restructuring Derek Carr's contract this offseason?
I don't know. We're gonna have to restructure a lot of contracts.
But for him too, I mean, like in theory, if you could move on after. It just seems like with that one, there's a pretty big.
Yeah, well, that's all part of cap management that we've got to deal with.
Follow up on the length of time, the process, the evaluations. Just because it gets asked a lot, why does it take as long as it does? So you view kind of being intentional about all that as a strength of this kind of institution of taking your time, making sure you get it right.
I think you should be. I mean, yeah, you should definitely be thorough. This is a huge decision. You shouldn't just go get an OC just to go get one. If you interview one, you like who that person is, it's a perfect fit, you trust it, you love it, whatever, make the hire. But there's no reason. This is an enormous decision. I would say the same thing about buying a house or buying a car or whatever. You don't want to just like go. You don't want to say, man, I want to buy a car. Go look at a car the next day and buy it right there on the lot. Like it does do you a favor in the long term to do your due diligence and to do some research and look around and slow down. So no different here. So I'm with Mickey on be elaborate or be deep and complex in your search. Get the right guy.
So what's the question?
That's something you view as a strength in terms of, it's not necessarily, just kind of twiddling your thumbs. Like there's a process that you go through. And
yeah, I just think.
Horrific question. I mean, like the question is basically, so y'all view it as a strength to take your time in searching for a candidate? You don't think you're just twiddling your thumbs? I don't think that anyone is twiddling their thumbs when they have a head coach vacancy or an OC vacancy or a DC vacancy. This is part of the process, my guy.
Any decision of this magnitude, it just has to be a thoughtful, well thought out process, right? And you have to, look, there's an obvious group of candidates, right? But there's another group of candidates that might not be quite so obvious that we need to make sure that we take a look at. And we'll do that.
Have you always been that deliberate, or is that something you learned?
I'm pretty deliberate. I've always been deliberate. I think that was one of Sean's complaints about me occasionally, is that I'm too deliberate and he's too impatient. So it was good. It was a good match, right?
People in your front office interview for other positions. Is that how you're kind of approaching that? Do you anticipate any changes?
Yeah, I don't know. Look, we got great candidates inside our building. Kai and Jeff and even Michael Parrington, and so we have some top flight executives in our building. And
so I think the question was, do you think your executives in the building will be entertaining other offers? I would be surprised if we don't hear Jeff Ireland and Kai Harley being put up for GM roles other places, especially Kai, because he's apparently the salary cap guru. And I think a lot of teams want that. They want the kind of innovative way of balancing cap and whatnot. So I think it's very important that we keep him. When I heard the rumor of Mickey going to VP, Kai going to GM, it made sense because I was thinking, okay, yeah, sure. If that's what you got to do to keep him, sure. Because Mickey's not going anywhere. He's got a lifetime contract basically. So if he's VP or GM, I don't care what letters of the alphabet he wants to use, right? So I would expect those two will be getting plenty of interviews.
And I'm rooting for them to get an opportunity. Although if they get one, I'll probably rue it. So,
yeah.
I know Carolina announced they're interviewing Kai Harley, and I can't remember if it was announced or reported that Jeff Ireland interviewing with the Chargers.
Yeah.
Have they been asked for other interviews?
Not that. No, they haven't yet.
Just to Pete for a second, obviously it's professional, but when you spend 18 years with somebody, there's a huge human component and personal relationship there. I mean, not that I want like the full peek behind the curtain, but like how emotional is that when you've been through so much with somebody?
Yeah, it's really emotional. Pete's he's a great coach, not a good coach. He's a great coach, and he's done. I think.
Like I've said before, they gave Pete every opportunity. I would assume it was pretty amicable. I honestly thought Pete was going to retire or kind of step away on his own. I thought the Saints were going to allow him to do that because, you know, we knew they were going to fire him or move on from him or however you want to phrase it. So I thought maybe save some face. You know, he could say he's stepping away or however. But and they really didn't come out and say like we have fired Pete Carmichael. I think the verbiage they used was pretty soft too. So we're fans, obviously. So it's easy for us to say get rid of him. But yeah, I'm sure a guy you work with, especially as close as Mickey probably works with Pete and some of the coaches. You know, he's there for almost 2 decades. You go through a lot. I'm sure it is difficult for a GM to fire and move people around.
Listen, we had historically good offenses here for a long period of time, and Pete was a much bigger part of that than he gets credit for. Really brilliant. You know, look, his first game as a play caller, I think we scored 60 points. So, yeah, it's emotional, and he's such a good person and such a great representative of the organization for all these years. And it was emotional for me, that's for sure. And it was emotional for a lot of people. By the way, I'm chewing this gum because I have a cough and it keeps me from coughing.
I want to know what the hell this gum is made out of, because this gum is getting chewed harder than any gum has been chewed ever. Mickey hasn't coughed once, and the gum is still standing. So, I mean, I don't know what it is, but I got to buy me some by the case. Unbelievable performance by this gum.
You plan in place for, I mean, I think Jeff's interviewing today.
Yeah.
And then plan in place for lose 1, lose 2. I mean, you don't want you want them to,
yeah,
proceed and be successful, but plan here if you really know.
Yeah, I mean, again, that'll be a thoughtful, intentional process if one or both go. So, no different than it was when Terry Fontenot went to Atlanta and Ryan Pace went to Chicago, and we've got great people behind those people too. So
I think the Saints front office is pretty strong. I really do think they're one of the better front offices. I mean, I think what Kai has done with the cap and all that stuff is so unique and so valuable. I think even Mickey and Ireland, kind of how they've done things is good. And the last couple of years have been frustrating because I think Mickey or whoever has been way too lenient with Allen and Carmichael. But we've gotten to where finally some dominoes are falling. We never expected it to be, all right, the Saints have fired Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael and the entire offensive staff and the entire defensive staff. That was never going to happen. So the fact that we made a change as big as moving on from Pete Carmichael, okay, I can take that. I can, even the Carr thing, like going and getting Derek Carr, whatever you think about him, like we made a splash. We went and got a quarterback who we thought was a good free agent quarterback. That's all you can ask from a team. Was it Lamar Jackson? No, but it wasn't rolling Trevor Siemian or Ian Book or whoever back out there. It wasn't saying, well, Andy Dalton was all right, I guess let's do it again. Like Mickey has kept the Saints relevant, so I do like the front office. I don't want wholesale front office changes with the Saints.
I'm really confident in the people we have in the building, but that doesn't mean we won't look outside the building either.
What was your overall assessment of the defense this season?
Yeah, I think it was a lot of
overall assessment of the defense. I think the defense was bad in the back end or the later part of the season. They were good against the Bucs, and the Falcons, but they were bad in the stretch before that. They were really good to start the season, wore down a little bit. There were some injuries. There were some bright spots too. The defense is getting older. I think we could probably get better at certain positions. I think you can look at some players like Paulson Adebo, Brian Brzee, Carl Granderson, look at them and say, okay, we got something here. We're rocking and rolling. Demario Davis was unreal again. I mean, Hall of Famer, what a guy. But, there's areas to get better. The defense is certainly not as old or bad or slow or whatever as people are making it out to be. And I have a sneaky feeling that with Dennis being able to focus more on the defense, we'll get a lot more out of the defense.
Good things, some ups and downs. felt like we had some young players develop and improve, and
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm excited about the prospects for our defense. I really am.
You seem kind of fired up compared to some of these other meetings, but
Yeah.
you have a lot of challenges going forward, right? Including a 3-year drought from the playoffs.
Yeah.
How do you feel personally, being the guy who's got to steward the organization through all of these challenges?
Yeah, look, I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the prospects of, the guys that are on the team, and they're. I'm excited about the willingness of all of our people, players.
If I was a GM, God, talk about a dream job. But if I'm the GM, if I'm Mickey in Mickey's shoes, I'm thinking this is the second best situation. First best is you've built a winner, you've built a dynasty, and you're just rolling that dynasty along, and you're just making tiny improvements to try and win Super Bowl after Super Bowl after Super Bowl. But in his spot, he's got a good foundation. He's got a good backbone of a roster. He's done the hard work with like going and getting Carr and all that. So now it's, okay, how do I move these smaller chess pieces around to elevate this team? He can really like implant his vision and ideas into this team this offseason. Like if you ever play a Madden or a NBA 2K dynasty or franchise or whatever, the offseason is the fun part, because that's where you can improve positions, that's where you can draft players, that's where you can go to free agency, that's where you can do all these things. That's if you're going to be proactive. And I think Mickey, from the way he's talking, the way he sounds, it sounds like he's going to be proactive. It sounds like he's going to go after this, and he's going to make some changes this offseason.
Coaches, staff, to look inward and say, look, I've got to do better. Including me. And so that gets me fired up. Look, I hate doing these press conferences. You guys know that. So typically I'm very stoic and unenthused, right? But I think we need enthusiasm. I think we need, a boost in energy and excitement in our building. And so that, again, all that stuff starts with me.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you. You go ahead.
No, go ahead. Mickey, how much you appreciate Ms. Gail Benson as an owner compared to maybe other owners around the NFL where they have no patience, and whether it's the Eagles or Dallas or whatever the team might be.
You can name them all.
Yeah. But I mean, you appreciate her ownership and how she has that trust.
What's kind of funny is whenever people are like, I see this in the comments all the time, when they're like, Gail's got to go. Like, it starts at Gail. It's like, guys, how the amount of ownership that is impactful on a positive level in the NFL is very slim. And that's when people are really just frustrated with the organization when they're pointing at Gail Benson. I don't think she has any impact one way or the other on this team. If you want to talk about positive changes for the Saints, it starts at Loomis. It goes from Loomis to the coaches to the players. Like, think about a team, right? Think about the Rams. How many of y'all in the comments think that Stan Kroenke is a great owner? How involved do you think he is with the roster building of the Rams? Who gets more credit there? Sean McVay or Stan Kroenke? Like when you look at the Chiefs, the Hunt family. What roster building are they doing? You can look at any team. Look at the Steelers. Look at the teams that are successful for a long term. The Ravens, like the ownership group of the Ravens. How many of you can name them? How many of you can name who owns the Baltimore Ravens? Who is the person? Who is the Gail Benson of the Ravens? Who's the Gail Benson of the Niners? Who's the Gail Benson of all these teams? Can you name any of them? I mean, here you go. It's a great example of what I'm talking about. I watch a lot of NFL talk. I've never heard Steve Biscotti mentioned as a great roster manager. He's the foundation for the Baltimore Ravens' success. How many of y'all knew he owned the Ravens? This is who the owner of the Ravens is. Since 2004. Since 2004, this guy has owned the Ravens through 2 Super Bowls and 227 games. First time I've ever heard his name. This is what I'm saying. When you're struggling, all of a sudden it's like, man, this owner's terrible. But when you're winning, you never hear about the owners. There are some owners that have become celebrities, like Jerry Jones, Jeffrey Lurie to an extent with the Eagles. The 49ers. Who do y'all think owns the 49ers? Who is the Gayle Benson of the 49ers? I'm going to reveal it. Go down in the comments below if you know. This guy. How many times have we heard this guy? How many times have we heard this fella right here as the roster Jed York? So I've heard the name Jed York, but I don't think anybody is going to say Jed York is just a roster genius. He's building a winner out there in San Francisco. Who gets the credit? John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, the players, the roster. So this whole Gayle Benson conversation is nuts. Like, Gayle is owner of the team. You know, she's a nice old lady, and it is what it is. She's not evaluating players. She's not evaluating anything that goes on with the roster. If you're concerned about, when I hear people say, man, we need a new owner. Who do you want to come in? What owner is going to come in and fix the team? It just doesn't happen. It's the ultimate just screaming at clouds.
Yeah, I absolutely. We just have the best owner in sports. We just do. And I felt that way about Tom Benson, too. And Tom was more emotional. Bobby, you know that. And yet, man, he just gives us everything we need to be successful. So if we're not successful, it's not on her, or it wasn't on him, it was on us.
The only thing, I'll say this, the only time an ownership group is bad is when the ownership group does not give the team what it needs to succeed. So I've heard about the Chargers in the past, had a bad ownership group. They just didn't care. They were absent. They just didn't give the resources to either the stadium or the fans or the team or whatever. I've heard Cincinnati at times was like that in the past. Tom Benson and now Gayle Benson have never been like that. They love the Saints. They're there for the Saints. I've run the Saints 5K for 3 years now, I think in a row. Gayle Benson's there every single time to give a little speech and to start us off, whatever. She's available. The Saints fans do get a lot from the ownership. The Saints team, I think, gets a lot from ownership as far as the resources. And Mickey's right. If they fail with those resources, it is what it is. But we don't have an ownership group that is detrimental to the team.
And that's all you can ask for in my role. And our coaches and our players. It's never no when we need something to help us win. And so that's so valuable. It's hard to even describe. And we can look around at different franchises and different sports and say, the problem starts up here. Well, it doesn't start up here with our owner. She's fantastic.
Can I follow up on that? Just speaking of money, there's a lot of coaching openings. There's going to be a lot of assistant coaches in demand. Does that play a factor, and will that be something when you try to lure an offensive coordinator here that you can?
Yeah, that won't be an issue.
Okay.
Mickey, you talked about enthusiasm. What are your thoughts on some of those games where the fan base, were booing or sold their tickets to other fan bases, and how do you get the fans back into it?
Good question. I mean, this is a big part of the season, was the fans kind of turning their back on the team. The fans kind of having enough. The fans saying, we don't want to watch this anymore. The fans were booing. The fans booed Carr and the offense off the field. The fans this year were as vocal and as displeased as I can remember in the last decade. So this was a big part, and Mickey had a horrible response during the season. He basically said the fans were selling their tickets because of financial hardships and just all kind of ridiculous stuff. So let's see what he says.
Get the fans back into it.
Well, you have to win. You have to perform well. That's on us, And look, there's a little bit of a double-edged sword. We just watched the Detroit Lions and their season and how fantastic that environment is, and winning for the first time in a long time. We experienced that here, right? We experienced it in 06, 07, 8, 9. You raise the bar, right? We raised the bar, and that's a good thing. And so now that we've raised the bar, we got to meet it. And if we're not meeting it, that's on us.
Yeah, agreed.
The only thing I really don't like is when we sell tickets to the opposing team and allow, a big group in our building. And look, that's popular here because New Orleans is a destination, right? When our opponents look at their schedule and they see New Orleans, that's the trip I'm going on.
They do travel, but I mean that has nothing to do. It's kind of the same thing. Like, fans don't sell their tickets if they want to watch the team. Fans sell their tickets if they don't want to go to the games, and they can make a lick. Because New Orleans is a destination for sure. The Superdome is a destination. The city is for, like I said, I've been going to games for over a decade now. And yeah, opposing teams do travel well. Whenever we do talk to those fans, they always say, like, we wanted to come to New Orleans and see what the city was all about. So he's right about that. And it is a double-edged sword, but it's the best kind of double-edged sword because you want the fans to be passionate about the product. The fans are only going to be passionate about the product if you give them something to root for. Same with the Lions. I guarantee you when the Lions were 0-16 and they were winless and they were getting rolled every single week, I guarantee you they were selling tickets. There was empty seats. They weren't loud. They weren't whatever. They're sweet this year. They're in competition for the 1 seed. Dan Campbell has built a culture. Look at how the environment was for the playoff game. It is a super easy fix. The question was, how do you get the fans back? The answer is win. That is it. It is the simplest possible algorithm. Just win. If you just win, the fans will be there. 100%.
Right? We understand that. It's part of the deal, part of being in a great city like New Orleans. So, but in terms of booing, the crowd reaction, that's on us. That's not on the fans. Look, if I was in the stands, there's a couple times I might have booed. I don't know.
Back to the question I asked about the age. Obviously, that's 50-something divided by something, but very clearly some core players. Almost everyone who's made an All-Pro on this team, Demario Davis, Cam Jordan, Ryan Ramczyk, Tyron, are in their 30s. What does give you the confidence that this roster is strong enough in the guys in their 20s to maintain that level?
Demario Davis was All-Pro. He's 35 years old, 34 years old,
I don't think age has anything to do with anything. I really don't. I like the oldest team in the NFL can win the Super Bowl. The youngest team in the NFL can win the Super Bowl. I just don't think it matters. Like the oldest quarterback in the NFL can be the MVP. The youngest can be the MVP. It's all about how you're playing, how the roster's built, where certain players are, positions are, as far as experience and whatnot. I don't think if I was a GM, I wouldn't look at that at all. As far as like, wow, we're the 32nd team in age. Wow, we're the oldest team. I wouldn't care whatsoever. I'd put the roster together, and then whatever the age, however it played out, it played out. But I wouldn't give it one iota of thought.
Cam Jordan basically played on one leg for more than half the season and was productive. So, age is a number. I get to say that because of my age. It's more about the performance. And
I was just about to say that.
And
I was just about to say that. Demario Davis, whatever he is, 35 years old, All-Pro, top 5 linebacker in the NFL. I'd much rather have him than some 22-year-old just for the sake of age. Now, if he's 35 but his performance is lacking, that's a strike in 2 columns, right? Then all of a sudden, okay, well, if you're 35 and give me a C performance, I can find a 20-year-old to give me that C performance. So it is a bit of a balancing act. But if an older player like Tom Brady, when Tom Brady was playing, he was the oldest quarterback in the NFL. And he was winning Super Bowls and leading the NFL in passing yards and touchdowns. Who cares how old he is? If he's playing at that level, I care less.
Some of these young guys that have come along, Alante Taylor and Paulson Adebo and Carl Granderson. I mean, I can name a lot of players, Eric McCoy, the receivers that we have. There's a lot of really good things. And look, these guys, remember this, around the league. These guys are under contract for generally three years, right? So it's not like you have them under contract for 15 years. You have them under contract for 3 years at a time, and then you make a decision. And so that's just our league. You know, that's what it's about. And so I'm comfortable with. I mean, I don't feel like we've got a particularly old team. And usually, I don't know what, I didn't see the one you're looking at, but usually the spread between the oldest and the youngest is like 12 months.
That's another thing, too. That's a good point. I see that a lot where people be like, we're the 32nd team in blank, whatever the category is. And then the number one will be like 0.8 away. It's like, it's not really much. Like, last sounds worse than we are. I'm just going to make something up. But to hear we're the oldest team in the NFL would be jarring, right? But if you said we are 14 months older on average than the youngest team, it's like, what does that even mean? Who cares? You know, like those two things can be the exact same, but phrasing it one way versus the other makes one just kind of irrelevant. So, yeah, I agree with Mickey on this one.
13 months. So it's not like
what did I say, 14 months?
You know, we got a team that's got a bunch of 35-year-olds and another one that's got a bunch of 23-year-olds.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to end the part 2 there. This video has gone pretty long, so we're going to end part 2. We're going to try and finish this in 3 parts. So be on the lookout for the next part coming out. Thank you for watching. I appreciate that very, very much. I will see you in the next video.